Have you ever felt a stranger's gaze latch onto you in an empty hallway? One night I realized I wasn't just paranoid, and what happened next still sends chills down my spine. I used to work part-time at a clothing store in our local mall. Usually I'd clock out around 8 or 9 p.m., then take a quick walk through the mall to reach the bus stop outside. It was a pretty straightforward routine until one week when I realized someone might be watching me. On a Monday night, I finished closing duties and headed into the main corridor of the mall. I was tired, hungry, and just wanted to get home. There weren't many people around. Most of the mall's stores were closing too. But as I passed a small kiosk, I noticed this middle-aged man sort of lurking, half hidden behind a pillar. He seemed a little out of place, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was waiting for someone. The next night, I saw him again. This time, he was standing in the accessories section of my store right before closing, pretending to look at scarves or something. When I left for the night, I spotted him in the corridor again, glancing at me over his shoulder as I walked by. By Wednesday, I couldn't ignore it anymore. About 30 minutes before closing, I caught sight of him drifting outside our glass storefront, back and forth, almost like he was waiting. When I tried to act normal and step out for a short break, he mirrored my every move through the corridor. If I ducked into a different shop, he followed. If I slowed down, he slowed down. Something about that constant presence got under my skin. That same night, I decided to leave through an alternate exit. The store I worked at had two doors, one that opened onto the main hallway and another that led to a side corridor. After clocking out, I quickly exited through the side door and walked briskly in the opposite direction of my usual route. I told myself, if he's really following me, he won't know I took this hallway. But when I turned the corner, I looked back, and there he was. Not running, not even speed walking, but just sort of gliding along, always keeping me in sight. At that point, I was freaked out enough to text a coworker. I basically said, "Hey, there's this man who's been hanging around me for days. Could you walk me to my bus stop?" She was still busy cleaning up, but promised she'd meet me in 10 minutes. I tried to stall by pretending to look at window displays of the closed shops, but the man hovered a short distance behind me the entire time. The tension really spiked when I finally headed to the bus stop with my coworker. It was late, so there were only a few people around, and most of the overhead lights in that outdoor walkway had either dimmed or gone out. As we waited, I spotted him again, standing in a pool of weak light, maybe 30 feet away, facing me directly. He never said a word. He was just there, staring. I remember my coworker whispering, "Okay, that's definitely the guy you've been talking about." When the bus arrived, we got on together. For a moment, I relaxed, figuring this man would either give up or at least realize I wasn't alone. But when I looked through the bus window, I saw him literally sprinting along the sidewalk, as if he were trying to find the next stop where he could intercept me. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. By the next stop, my coworker and I peered out the window, terrified he'd somehow caught up. We didn't see him, which was a massive relief. But the whole ride home, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still looking for me somewhere in the night. The next day, I told my manager everything. She took it very seriously and asked security to walk me out for the rest of the week. Thankfully, after that, I never saw him again. But to this day, I still don't like being in that mall late at night. I'll always remember how his distant silhouette felt so threatening in those empty corridors. It was like having a constant shadow, one you couldn't shake no matter how fast you ran. Got a horrifying encounter of your own? Send it my way and don't forget to like and subscribe. There's no telling what nightmares we'll uncover next. When the bus arrived, we got on together. For a moment, I relaxed, figuring this man would either give up or at least realize I wasn't alone. But when I looked through the bus window, I saw him literally sprinting along the sidewalk, as if he were trying to find the next stop where he could intercept me. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. By the next stop, my coworker and I peered out the window, terrified he'd somehow caught up. We didn't see him, which was a massive relief. But the whole ride home, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still looking for me somewhere in the night. The next day, I told my manager everything. She took it very seriously and asked security to walk me out for the rest of the week. Thankfully, after that, I never saw him again. But to this day, I still don't like being in that mall late at night. I'll always remember how his distant silhouette felt so threatening in those empty corridors. It was like having a constant shadow, one you couldn't shake no matter how fast you ran. Got a horrifying encounter of your own? Send it my way, and don't forget to like and subscribe. There's no telling what nightmares we'll uncover next. Have you ever locked a motel room door only to wish you'd never been there? One night, the price of the room was nothing compared to what it truly cost me. I travel a lot for work, mostly driving between small towns for sales calls, and I'm used to staying in out-of-the-way motels. I thought I'd seen it all until one night last fall, when I realized just how vulnerable you can be behind a flimsy lock and a thin door. I'd pulled into this roadside motel sometime around midnight, exhausted from a day of back-to-back meetings. It looked run down, but I didn't care. I just needed a bed. Check-in was uneventful, and the clerk barely looked up from his phone. My room was at the far end of a dimly lit corridor. No other guests seemed to be around. No chatter, no TV noise bleeding through the walls. It was unsettlingly quiet. I dropped my bags and noticed the bolt on the door was kind of rusty, but it seemed to click into place. After a quick shower, I climbed into bed. Must have fallen asleep in minutes. Then, at around 2 a.m., I jolted awake to a faint tapping, like someone gently drumming their fingers on the door. In my half-conscious state, I thought maybe I was dreaming, but it persisted. My heart thudded in my chest as I sat up, listening. The tapping stopped, and then I heard a soft scrape of metal against metal. My skin prickled. Someone was messing with my door. I reached for my phone, fumbling in the dark. As my eyes adjusted, I inched toward the peephole, trying not to make a sound. When I peered out, I felt my blood turn to ice. A man in dark clothes was crouched low, face partially hidden by a baseball cap, hands working at the lock with some kind of tool. I could see the concentration etched in what little I could make out of his features. My heart pounded so loudly I was terrified he'd hear it. I forced myself to step away from the door and dial the front desk. It rang and rang. No answer. By now, the scraping had turned into an urgent clicking, like he was getting frustrated. I glanced around frantically for something to block the door, but all I had was a wobbly chair and the small dresser that held the TV. As I started dragging the dresser, I heard a click, so loud in the stillness it might as well have been a gunshot. I froze. He'd gotten through the first lock. The doorknob jiggled, and then the door creaked open an inch. I dove behind the bed, heart racing, fumbling to find something, anything, to defend myself. My phone, a lamp, a coat hanger. Everything felt useless. I peeked around the bed just as the door swung fully open. Light from the hallway spilled into the dark room, and I saw him step inside. For a split second, we locked eyes. His flickered with confusion, like he hadn't expected to see me awake and staring right back at him. I can't describe the sheer terror of that moment. We both were frozen, like animals in headlights. He had no mask, no gloves, just a twitchy, startled expression. My instincts screamed at me to do something, but I was paralyzed. My mind raced. Was he just a thief who thought the room was empty? Was he planning something worse? Before I could scream or grab the lamp, he bolted, like the sight of me shattered whatever plan he had. He dashed back into the hallway, his footsteps echoing into the night. I scrambled to the door and slammed it shut, hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the lock. I shoved the dresser in front of it anyway, my whole body trembling with adrenaline. It took me nearly half an hour just to calm down enough to think straight. I finally reached the front desk, and some barely awake clerk insisted, "We'll send someone to check it out." But I never heard a knock or a voice at my door. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, gripping my phone with one hand and a makeshift weapon, a broken lamp base, in the other. At sunrise, I grabbed my stuff and practically sprinted to my car. The front desk worker just apologized with a shrug, like it was an everyday occurrence. I didn't press it. I just wanted out of there. Now I never stay at a motel, any motel, without triple-checking the locks and using my own portable doorstop. No matter how many times I tell myself it was just a random break-in attempt, I can't forget the moment our eyes met. That look of confusion and fear on his face haunts me to this day, because it mirrors exactly how I felt, completely unprepared for the darkness waiting just outside my door. Have you ever discovered the true cost of budget lodging? If you've lived through a terrifying encounter or know someone who has, share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. And if you enjoyed or survived this tale, hit that like button and subscribe for more chilling true stories. Have you ever believed your workplace was a safe place, only to discover it was your worst nightmare in the making? I've been bartending at a neighborhood pub for a little over a year now. It's one of those cozy places where regulars joke around and the crowd mostly consists of locals. Usually, I feel safe. Our bouncer walks the late shift staff to their cars if it's past closing. But a few months back, I started noticing this guy who made me question that safety. He showed up on a slow Tuesday, just sitting in the corner nursing a beer for hours. He barely spoke to anyone, not even to me unless he wanted a refill. There was nothing obviously menacing about him, but something about the way he never looked away from me gave me chills. When we closed that night, he waited until the last minute to leave, watching me wipe down the bar like he was studying every movement. Over the next couple of weeks, he became a fixture, always at the same seat, not engaging in conversation or even looking at the television. My usual regulars would sometimes joke, "Hey, you've got an admirer." But the vibe he gave off wasn't flattering or fun. It was intense, unsettling. One night, after last call, everyone slowly trickled out. I was counting tips when I realized he was still there, perched at the corner of the bar. He had this forced grin on his face as he said, "Need help cleaning up?" I told him politely that we were closed and the bouncer would be escorting customers out. He didn't take the hint. He just lingered and asked personal questions. Did I live nearby? Did I have a boyfriend? When I firmly said I needed to lock up, he finally walked out, but not without giving me this stare like he was memorizing my face. A few nights later, I wrapped up and left through the back door, hoping to avoid any run-ins. But there he was, leaning against the street lamp near my car. My heart lurched into my throat. He started talking as soon as I was within earshot, saying he'd waited around to make sure I got to my car safely. His voice was way too friendly, as if we knew each other better than we did. I tried to keep it cool, but when he stepped closer, my hands started shaking. I just wanted to get in the driver's seat and lock the door. He offered me a ride, like he was oblivious to my obvious unease. When I said no, he persisted, stepping forward so I couldn't open my car door. Suddenly, our bouncer appeared out of nowhere. "Is there a problem here?" he asked pointedly. The man froze, shot me a look that felt like a warning, then backed away. He mumbled something under his breath and walked off, disappearing down the dark street. After that night, my manager insisted on a new closing procedure. Now there's always at least one other person with me from start to finish. I haven't seen him since, but every time I turn the key in my car's ignition after a late shift, I still have that fleeting terror that he's lurking in the shadows, waiting for his chance to corner me again. It's a fear I can't quite shake, no matter how many nights go by without seeing his face. Have a haunting experience you'd like to share? Send it my way and don't forget to like and subscribe. This is only the beginning of our deepest fears.